I think that's a very good snapshot of the controversy around called, because we hear the term BIPOC, BAME, which has their own, the people that I work with are traditionally underrepresented.
What would be your advice to women who have been intentionally shut down?
Black and brown women and other women, including white women, who said that, look, we don't need to lean in. We are already confident.
Our guest today is Vimala Thangaveloo. Vimala is an executive coach, corporate counsel, and qualified company secretary. She is a passionate advocate for culturally and linguistically diverse women, called, and firmly believes that owning our confident voices sparks personal empowerment and reshapes the corporate world. Vimala lived across continents before finding a home in Australia. Her perspective, shaped by her Southeastern Asian heritage and an international career, highlights the need for diverse workplaces and the implementation of strong governance practices in businesses. Vimala has engaged in initiatives that amplify underrepresented voices, including launching an award-winning project podcast with her employer, celebrating diversity, equity, and inclusion, hosting speaking engagements on executive presence, career confidence, and career branding, as well as advocating for better inclusion of called employees. She's a multi-certified coach and empowers called women experiencing mid-career challenges to confidently own their voices so they grow in their careers on their own terms. Her journey of resilience through the solitude of being the only one in many work settings has imbued Vimala with a love for the diversity of human experience. She treats each person's attributes as pieces of higher mosaic, inspiring her to launch her business, Mosaic Working. Vimala's mission is to inspire, engage, and uplift individuals and organisations, steering us towards a more just and equitable society. Wow. Welcome to the show, Vimala. That was a huge introduction. I hope I did it justice.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Em. I've been a fan of the show, and it's a real honor and a privilege to be here today.
Oh, well, thank you for making the time to talk to us. I followed you on LinkedIn and I absolutely love what you stand for, what you advocate for, and your energy. Your energy is really, really, like, you've got really great energy. I'm curious about one thing, like, before we even start any discussion, I want to discuss this term culturally and linguistically diverse women or people. What's your take on that term? Because I know it's been a bit contentious over the past few months.
And before I answer that question, may I ask, what is your understanding of contentiousness that comes across with that term?
From what I've read and for what people have said, I think it's a term that describes everyone because we are all culturally and linguistically diverse. But it's a term that seems to be used when it refers to brown and black people and not all people. So I think there's not misconception, but there's this school of thought that the term called waters down the experiences of black and brown people, and it sort of puts everyone into the fold because we are all culturally and linguistically diverse.
I think that's a very good snapshot of the controversy around called. I actually came across the term quite recently, and it seems to be quite Australia specific, because we hear the term BIPOC, BAME, which has their own controversies. And the people that I work with are traditionally underrepresented. So we use called as a term which captures, of course, the brown and black people's experience. And that's my lived experience as well, being a brown woman, a woman of color in corporates, in what is traditionally underrepresented. So even though brown and black people are the global majority, you see that there's a lack of representation in spaces which are where business decisions are made, corporate decisions. And I have a wide clientele. I work with women, white women as well. Most of my work is geared towards women who are brown and black. And I use the term called because it is a known term in Australia, without really denying any of the pain points that goes into the controversy. It's a way to capture what I think the intent, the people who came up with this term was, which is more traditionally underrepresented women.
Oh, I love that. I think we've just solved the controversy. Yeah.
Bring
No,
on
that was
another
really good.
controversy. Let's solve it.
Yes. We're going to solve all the issues today. Watch out,
Everything.
world. But I love your take on that because it's what's known. So if you use what's known, then you communicate effectively. I've got a question for you. So we are in International Women's Month because it cannot just be a day. And International Women's Month, the theme at the moment is also controversial because there are lots of themes being thrown around. There's invest in her, counter in, and then there's inspire inclusion. So, in terms of investing in her, I'm not concerned about the theme. I'm concerned about the intent. What do you think is the main reason that women have been excluded from decision-making tables, and particularly women of color?
So this year's theme, as we are recording, in International Women's Day is tomorrow. And this year's theme is indeed, as you said, invest in her. And I've seen a lot of narratives and opinion pieces in the media which talks about this theme. The themes that particularly come out this year is, or rather are, women getting paid to speak. So there's lots of my sisters who have come out to say, well, stop asking us to speak for free. And when you say it's because of exposure ain't going to pay the bills. So there's a call to women to not speak for free because of the precedent that they are setting. So to me, this is twofold when it comes to the invest in her theme, which is, yes, other people, men, women, organizations, please invest in women. Invest in us for the time that we took to prepare. Invest in us for sharing potentially painful stories. Invest in us for showing up and really putting our blood, sweat, and tears in the presentation. So that's one part of it. For me, there's another part, we investing in ourselves as well. And this is not victim blaming. How do we invest in ourselves and in our sisterhood? Like what my sisters have said on social media, be very cognizant that when you then show up and speak for free, on how that trickles down to others. And invest in yourself, invest in her, invest in Vimala, invest in Vimala's growth, invest in Vimala's well-being, invest in Vimala's soul by taking care of us. So that's one theme. And the other theme that comes up is one where certain parties say, well, there's just not enough of women to go around for various reasons. You don't have the technical expertise. You don't have the executive presence, and you don't fit the mold. So that has been justified for having, let's say, leadership teams and board of directors that a particular gender or a particular, dare I say, the R word, race or ethnicity, the E word. I don't think these are bad words, but somehow they seem to be hot potato words. So I'm going to say it anyway, race and ethnicity. And there have been beautiful, really, narratives on and opinion pieces on social media which says that, well, that's not an excuse. How is that an excuse when you have a nation that is 50% women? And I'm using percentages holistically, I'm not going into details. 50% of us are women. And how many of us are Black and brown and immigrants? I think it was one of your posts, Em, if I'm not mistaken, that talked about, and I can't remember the lady who said it, but you quoted her. She talked about how there is such an untapped resource in the immigrant population that's not being used properly or adequately for leadership positions. Do you remember that post, Em?
Yes.
I was like, support. So that's a bit of a long answer, but that was a very important question that I just wanted to unpack a bit, because it's not just the theme, it's what goes under the surface.
I love that. And I love how you mentioned that also investing in yourself. And one of the questions that not questions, but something I've been reflecting on this week is, we always talk about invest in her, counter in. How are we as women investing in each other? How are we counting ourselves in? And when you look at the panels for International Women's Day, it's disappointing because 60 to 80% of those panels all look the same. So if we as women are not counting ourselves in and are not investing in ourselves, how do we expect others to be doing the same? So bit of controversial comment there. I just had to throw that in.
Absolutely.
And it comes from a place of not victim blaming as well. It's not saying that I, the brown woman, should be putting myself up, or I, the woman, should be elbowing myself in. I think there is a opportunity for the people who are inviting speakers and panelists to, of course, do better. And not only, as you said, International Women's Day, it's International Women's Month, it's International Women's Year. It can't just be a day. And there's also for us, how do we, if we are, I was working with a really intelligent woman from the STEM industry, and she is amazing in what she does, but she shies away from being on panels, even when invited, because she doesn't feel confident. And that's why I'm working with her to own her confident voice and step up. But she did dare I say, the right thing by investing in herself, getting a coach, and helping to work with her to overcome that reticence.
Absolutely. I think that maybe it's a way, women are raised a certain way that you must be modest. You mustn't talk about how great you are. You must wait to be called. You can't put your hand up. And I think in some cultures it's more prevalent than others, but I think every woman has been told you have to be a lady, you have to sit back and wait to be invited to dance. You don't get a boy up to dance, that sort of thing. We're brought up that way. And I think what links in then in the boardrooms and so many spaces that we see it is, yes, investing, but you also need to value. You have to value yourself and what you have to offer, and don't take that backward step and go, I'll wait till somebody else sees it and values it. It's what we do. It's built into us, unfortunately, as women. But there's got to be some way to push through that and go, I have value. Pay me, appreciate me, invite me, or I'll turn up anyway and bring that. So I think we all see that. Whatever colour we are, women tend to hold ourselves back. And that's not victim blaming either. I just think it seems what happens.
Sorry, I spoke over you there. I completely agree. And I've been in a lot of spaces in a lot of corporate spaces, because I've been a corporate attorney for about 25 years now. And I see women do this in meetings. So for those just hearing the podcast, I just raised my hand before speaking. And it's being polite. And you're absolutely right, Sandra. This is women of all cultures, whether you're Black, brown, or white. Typically, we raise our hands before contributing to the meeting. So when I see that, it takes me back to when we were in school, when we were taught to raise our hands before asking a question. And that carries through in the boardrooms, in the leadership meetings, in the team meetings, as opposed to our brethren who come out and just say what they want or ask a question without raising their hands or saying this. Can I can I please ask a question? Can I make a comment? Again, asking for permission. And I love what you said, Sandra, because that implies you don't need to ask for permission. Permission is given. Ask, do, be. So thank you for that, Sandra. That's amazing.
Thank
That
you.
was so good. How do you, like, in your opinion, Vimla, you work with a lot of women and coach, and through coaching, you probably come across a lot of scenarios. But what would be your advice to women who have been intentionally shut down? So what I mean is, there are women who do speak up, women who do invest in themselves and are assertive, but then other women and other men within organizations then are uncomfortable with this because it's out of norm. It's not ladylike, and you need to sit down, you need to behave. And some of the comments that have been spoken to me as well, and, even to Sandra in some instances, is you're too much. And it might be quite, and then when you hear something like that, particularly from a senior leader in an organization, something happens psychologically. So what would be your advice? How do we, as women, maintain our growth and not let people's voices shut us down and take us backwards?
And thank you for the question. It's such an important question. And before answering that, I just want to share something that I read about this book by Sheryl Sandberg. You might have heard of it, Lean In, which is a really popular book. Black and brown women and other women, including white women, who said that, look, we don't need to lean in. We are already confident. We already speak our truth, but we are told by the organization, by the senior leaders, that we need to just calm down a bit. So whether you're too much or you are even the word aggressive, and I've heard those in the coaching conversations that I've had. And first of all, I want to really hold space for people who have heard this. It is painful. It is, and also discombobulating, because on one hand, you hear that women should be more, we should lean in, we should step up. And when we do that, then we are told, well, hang on a minute, just hang on a minute. As you said, Sandra, as you indicated, you please just sit down a minute, calm down, think before you talk. It's really confusing, and it's one of the reasons we lose our confident voices. So what do we do? I worked with a woman who went through a really difficult time when her organization was being restructured. And it was a stressful situation all around, and she was trying to get roles, and she was hearing this very mixed messages. You are too passionate. That is not a compliment. You are too vocal. And what she found herself was, because of the stresses, she started really having the stress show up in her day-to-day conversation. So she's actually a really calm, competent professional. She started getting really sharp, really short, and in her interactions really suffered. So one of the things we did was really firstly acknowledge that it's a difficult situation, let go of the stress. Sometimes the nervous system is short, so we work through processes to let go of the stress. And then we started coaching her to ask really good questions. And what do I mean by this? Questions, one of my mentors told me that the higher the quality of your questions, the higher the quality of your life. So when a senior member of leadership, for instance, says, well, you are being too much, you did not conduct yourself well in that meeting, take a deep breath. A less effective way is to say, what do you mean? And come at it in a way that's quite combative. And I know this is not easy, taking a step down to really get curious. Okay, thank you for sharing. Could you explain what that means rather, and really get specific on what's the feedback? Is this more an all-encompassing batch, or is it something that you can really learn from? And have a conversation that when you said this, do you realize that that's a X, Y, and Z? Do you realize that that just feeds into the bias that women should not speak up? Now, this assumes that you can have that conversations, because sometimes um, it's difficult when the relationship is already frayed. So in that instance, I would suggest getting a mentor, another senior leader to speak, or a sponsor to speak to the senior leader. And if that doesn't work, you've really got to assess to see whether or not that organization is the right place to be. There is no one size fits all. So you've got to try a couple of strategies.
Really like what you shared there, and the the purpose of our podcast is to really bring value to our listeners, and we have people from all walks of life that tune in every week to listen, and I think this is going to be extremely valuable to them. I think it's also like what you said about then assessing if it's the right organization for them. I have shared, there's a time I was told that too much conversation, and also that I needed to be softer because I didn't back down from a debate. So the expectation was that because I'm a woman, I needed to relent and let the men win. And because I didn't do that, I came across as hard and not soft. I'm curious. I'm curious about what Sandra thinks on this one. Why should women be soft? Like, what does that even mean? I don't understand what it means to be soft in that context.
Yeah, I struggle with it as well. And it's exactly what Vimala was saying before, where you told something, you've behaved in a certain way, or you're not coming across. But what is the specific? And generally, I've found that it's somewhere you have this intuitive feeling that somehow you are being attacked. Either you're not fitting in, or you're not measuring up in some way, and then your natural response is to come across as defensive, come across as, I'm under attack here, I must defend myself, I must come out this way. And if you are in that situation, and I suspect that most of us have been, you probably will shut down the softer side of you because you're vulnerable. You go, well, I'm not showing you that bit because, if I open up this tiny little bit, the knives will go in. In certain corporate situations, sometimes even other relationships, that tends to happen. And so, yes, you do harden. It's not probably the natural way that most people would like, male and female, to behave. I mean, if someone is welcoming and is kind and encouraging, they're going to get that back from you. But if you're feeling some sort of agenda or some sort of hostility for whatever reason, that's going to reflect in your interactions with those people. So I'd be saying to companies and organisations, have a look at your own culture and what are your people projecting to make people who may come across as soft or compliant or consultative. Consultative might be seen as soft in some organisations because, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't make strong decisions. Well, no, because we're consulting. But sometimes you can't consult because you just don't know where your ideas are being taken and what the real agenda is behind some interactions that you have with people. Now, that's coming from a negative experience that I've had in certain workplaces. We've all probably experienced them, but we've also experienced there is alternatives out there. There is consultation. There is an ability that we can bring our genuine selves to our workplace. And then you don't get told how to behave because you're behaving exactly what people want. They want individuals. They want diversity. They want genuine authenticity. But anyway, I don't know if that answered your question, but I just had this flow of...
No, that was such a great point, Sandra. And there is more discussion about being culturally aware. In Australia, there is increased realization that we are multicultural Australia. I think in the last podcast, you interviewed the CEO of Multicultural Australia, and
Yes.
I completely believe in multicultural Australia. There's more discussions, absolutely. So there's a important piece for companies to really dig in, lean in, if you like, to dismantle systemic tropes about what is acceptable in the workplace. So what I've heard before is that if an African woman speaks out in a way that is emphatic, she's branded the angry Black woman. And we see that. I'm sure you've never heard of that, Em. And you see the angry brown woman trope as well. Well, it's not angry. You can see it's passionate. It's being emphatic. You're an intelligent woman. You're making a point. So how do you personally? There's a part, as we said, for companies to do. What is our roles in it, especially when you are faced with that? And I have a mentor who's an African American woman who's so calm in face of such unfair accusations. And she just goes into this place of calmness and curiosity. I'm not saying it's easy, but when done, it really unpacks either biases or some situation that needs to be addressed. Yeah. Oh, this is
This is a very deep conversation. The last question I'll ask you on the whole women thing is how to respond. So one of the things that I've been told as well, and I keep using myself as a case study, because I know that most of the comments spoken to me are quite typical of comments spoken to other strong women, and don't want to look at it from a race perspective. I want to look at it from a gender perspective, because I know with many women in my circles, these are things that have been spoken to them as well. And one particular comment that disarmed me, and I'm not easy to disarm, was that I'm not needy. And it was a criticism, not a compliment. And this surprised me, because my assumption as a capable leader in an organization is I'm not going to be running to my manager or to the CEO or to the managing director with every small problem, because I've been placed in this position to solve those problems. But unfortunately, the way that's then taken is she's not needy. She thinks she can do it all. And somehow that's a negative. So this would be, I would say, what would be your advice to men who find themselves with strong, independent women that report into them? How best can they bring the best out of them and not silence them?
such a good example. And I don't normally get surprised with comments. I must say that this surprises me. I am not needy and sit in the context of a work relationship and not a romantic relationship. So, could I ask you, was there any clarification on what needy meant?
Yes, there was, because I always adopt the please explain further attitude. So when there's something I don't understand, I do pause and ask further. And my question in that instance, because it was the third time that was said to me, and I asked for a meeting to seek clarification on what that particular person meant by I'm not needy. And his explanation was that when everyone else, like all the other women reporting into him, always called him for advice, or if there was a problem, they'd always call him. And on this particular time, I had quite a big problem with someone else within the team, within the senior leadership team, which I resolved on my own. And unfortunately, my manager then took it. His comment was, I feel you don't need me. And that makes me uncomfortable. And I was really confused, because in a work situation, I don't think it is the role of women to make men feel needed. Like, that definitely wasn't my role. I had bigger things I needed to be working on. I had a really big portfolio. But that did stay with me for a while, and it really confused me. And I wasn't sure if it's an Australian thing, because I've certainly not. Yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting. And I'm curious to know your perspective on that.
And thank you for explaining. And I'm really sorry that you had to go through such a experience, because you're right, it is confusing. It can throw you, because you're absolutely right. And I think not in a work situation, even in romantic relationships, it's not a job of one party to make the other feel uncomfortable. But I suspect that's the topic of a whole another episode. And it's certainly not the job of women or anyone in an organization to make your supervisors, men or women, feel comfortable. And of course, not knowing a lot about the situation, I just want to, first of all, commend you for really getting into the curiosity zone and asking the reason behind it. And I suspect that you took certain actions based on that response. Again, the topic for another podcast, M. But what I'd say to men who are in leadership positions, actually everyone, men or women, I think it's important to set ways of working. So I'm not sure whether this person, your line manager, had a lack of vocabulary to explain what he wanted, or whether he was just like feeling a bit insecure because you were there smashing goals. If we in leadership set the expectations that, look, I expect to be updated when you are having conversations with my boss. I expect a weekly update on things that, or projects or matters that are above 5 million Australian dollars. So if we set very clear expectations, then it will help the miscommunication later on, or any miscommunication that may happen, because you're very clear. And you can also, if that was, I'm not sure, was that done, M, in your situation as far as ways of working?
It was. So there's a certain expectation of how we would work. And I had reported to someone different at the same level. And the what we'd established is we do have our weekly catch-ups, and that's where we discuss everything. But I think what was concerning for this new person was my lack of being vulnerable. I think the more I thought of it, the more I realized it was not a me problem. It was
Yeah.
a he problem, because I am not going to be soft. So the terms used were, you need to be soft. You need to be softer. You need to be soft. You need
Yeah.
to be more vulnerable. You need to be a bit more needy. So all these, I think, misconceptions or gendered feelings that are supposed to be women and that I was not portraying in this role, then they didn't know what to do with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if those discussions have been had and you were actually communicating that, but it's an accusation of you for not fitting into the nice square space of what a woman should do, it's not a you, as you said, it's not a you problem. It's a systemic issue. And that's when that happens, I advise my clients to really look outside the organization. That's why many women leave, because you're really in a space where you are unsafe, you're criticized. And the issue that I see then is place sense of loyalty. Oh no, I need to work for this organization because they have done so much for me. And we work through that to say, well, actually, this is a business relationship. You don't need to be soft or vulnerable or needy. You need to really navigate for yourself. I think Sandra was talking about that as well. Really step into, don't ask for permissions. You really have a clear view of where your career is going in that environment. and if need be, look for another place.
Mm.
And I'm curious, Em, what did you do in that scenario?
I I then said, "Oh, I think you are looking for the wrong relationship with me." I didn't last very long after that
And
because
imagine the
I
brain
felt,
drain, right?
yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
Em.
I just, that's okay. I felt like I was being placed. I felt like the relationship was getting very confusing. It
Yeah,
did not feel like a work relationship anymore, and
yeah.
the criticism was always on my behavior, not on my performance. And my behavior had nothing to do with performance or leading a team or anything. It had to do with how he felt with
Mm,
with his confidence and his ego and how he needed to be needed. So yeah, that was confusing. But I always think what didn't help me in that situation is the way the other women then behaved, which was being
mm,
vulnerable and being girly and a lot of this as well,
mm,
which then, and I was always told, why don't you behave more like these women?
mm,
Because they are soft, they are vulnerable, and they always need me. And I know they
mm.
didn't. They played a part. They're very strong, capable women, but they played a part to survive. I can't fake it. I couldn't fake it, and I was the odd one out.
I was.
It takes its toll.
It takes a toll, and I
Yeah.
had this question the other day on what if you're being your best self and really growing your career, and your growth then makes your line manager feel insecure, and that's a real
Mm,
thing.
mm,
That's a real thing.
yeah.
Possibly something that happened in your situation. And if that's the case, if having conversations then doesn't help, if bringing other people in to intervene doesn't help, well, my view is that it's your career. Are you going to fit in? And no judgment if people want to do that, that's fine for them. But what about you? Can you stomach that? And it looks like we are here because you couldn't, and that's a good thing.
We've got to a better place.
Yes, I do love that. And I like what you said about misplaced loyalty. And I think a lot of people need to hear that, not just women. I think you have to really
Mm.
assess where your loyalty is placed. Is it to your family or is it to the organization? It's a very good assessment to take out.
And it's
That
such a
is,
simple analogy.
I know. But it's so powerful. And I think it's a great place for us to end episode today. Like, we don't want to end it. We want to keep going because this has been such a great conversation. And one of the things you've mentioned, Vimla, and even and to you, Sandra, as well, during our conversation is the fact that there is enough room for all of us. And I think the more that we practice it in the way we talk, in the way we advocate for other people, not seeing the inclusion of others as a threat, but seeing it as something that enriches our communities, enriches our organizations, will be all the better for it. So when the table around you and the people around the table look like you, start asking yourself these questions. What are we actively doing in our organizations? Or what am I actively doing in my friendship circles to expand the people that surround me, to talk to people that I would ordinarily not talk to, or to hire someone whose accent makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable, So we all collectively have a role to play. We all collectively have a role to make our communities, our organizations the best they possibly can. Because if we don't, we're robbing the future generations of an equitable, justifiable, great society. And Vimla, can you tell us, if our listeners want to hear from you or just follow your journey, where can they find you?
Um, and they can find me on LinkedIn. Just type in my name, Vimala Thangaveloo, and I think my name will be in the show notes. And please follow and reach out to me on direct messaging, DMs.
Mm. And if they want to work with you?
Send me a DM.
Same. Perfect. So I would Sandra and I have been greatly empowered just from this conversation. So I can imagine how your clients benefit from working with you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and your passion and your heart. It's been an incredible perspective hearing from you and understanding your journey and your passion in building an equitable society that we can all thrive in. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Empowered Voices Amplified. Sandra and I have definitely been empowered by Vimla. Vimla, thank you so much for your time today. And to our listeners, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Empowered Voices Amplified. Please let us know what you think of this episode if you have any questions, and we will get back to you. Thank you again and have a great week.